Is there any finer time to be in the inland Northwest than the fall? Crisp air, bright colors, and the promise of Gonzaga basketball just around the bend. But this year, many of the issues that challenged companies throughout the pandemic continue to plague us. Employers in many sectors are grappling with workforce shortages, supply chain issues, and rising costs. All the while, many of their employees are struggling with housing shortages, childcare crisis, and the looming threat of COVID-19. But we are Spokane. We are Coeur d'Alene. We are the inland Northwest. We are nothing if not resilient and resourceful. At the Journal of Business, we endeavor to keep you, our readers, informed about what's happening in your community. Our staff is dedicated to providing you with objective information on news and trends, with the goal of helping you be more successful in your chosen path. It's time to go beyond the sound bites. It's time for more depth than 140 characters can provide. It's time for elevating the conversation.
Well, good afternoon and welcome again to Elevating the Conversation. My name is Paul Reed and I'm honored to serve as publisher of the Journal of Business. And I'm also honored that every month so many of you join us for these really important discussions that we've been having. You know, we started the Elevating the Conversation series for that reason, because you asked us for a venue to have important conversations about the challenges our community faces. We've done just that. We've had a great year so far. In January, we had Stephanie Curran from the PFD talk about the convention market, Dr. Frank Velazquez with the Spokane Regional Health District. We had NAACP's Keonta Duncan. We had developer Jim Frank on the housing shortage. We had Washington Trust Steve Scranton on the economy. Robert Half's Jennifer Koenig on the tight labor market. Kimberly and Haygood's Gordon Hester on the downtown office and retail market. Community College's Chancellor Christine Johnson on higher education, and Gonzaga's Rochelle Strowther on empowering women in business. Last month, we had Shelley O'Quinn on giving trends in our century. Next month, we talk with Avista Corp Chief Economist Grant Forsyth about the business outlook in 2022 and beyond. But today, I'm very pleased to have with us Larry Krauter, CEO of Spokane International Airport, for a discussion about the future of aviation here. Make no mistake, our airport is a key driver in our economy, and we often don't give enough credit to our discussion about its role in our community's vitality. This should be a great conversation, and I hope you come up with some wonderful questions for Larry in the next 30 minutes or so. But before we get to that, I want to thank Impact Washington for sponsoring this month's Elevating the Conversation. We don't get to do these things without the great support of some wonderful organizations, including Impact Washington. With us today is Nick Wilkes of Impact Washington to say a few words. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Wilkes with Impact Washington, account executive and business advisor for Eastern Washington. First, let's just say thanks to the Journal for providing a platform for this conversation. It's no secret that a thriving aviation industry in Washington has always been a key to a healthy economy and the well-being of our residents. We're excited to learn more from Larry's perspective. Impact Washington is the Washington affiliate of the Department of Commerce MEP program. MEP stands for the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. Through this partnership, it's our mission to strengthen and empower Washington manufacturers. Since 1997, we've done this by helping over 1,500 manufacturers through growing their sales, improving productivity, bolstering their supply chain, and training a more resilient workforce. Quite often, we have the opportunity to administer funding programs to support these manufacturers through on-site projects through our team of experts. From raw material providers to manufacturers of finished components, it's clear that Eastern Washington is a key player in the aviation sector, now and into the future. We're just thrilled to be a part of the local community supporting the direction of aviation. If you'd like to connect with us, we'd love to learn more about any business challenges you have and really just show you how we're a resource for local manufacturers. You can learn more by going to impactwashington.org. Thanks again for your participation in today's chat.
Thank you, Nick. Good words. Welcome to Elevating the Conversation. My name is Lynn Parrish. I'm the editor of the Journal of Business. And as Paul mentioned, I'm joined today by Larry Krauter. It's been a while, Larry. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, we got a little breaking news from the airport earlier today about a new
a second FBO at Spokane International. Is that right?
That's right, Lynn. We're very excited with this announcement, and it culminates a long period of work to bring this opportunity to our market. We announced today that the board has approved a lease and concession agreement with Marathon FBO Partners, LLC. They are currently building other FBOs in 2 other locations in the country. So this will be their 3rd FBO. And they're former FBO executives and airline executives. They've been in the business a long time. They really believe in the Spokane market like we do and share our vision.
Great.
And we're very excited. They're going to come in and lease property at Spokane International Airport and develop facilities that are estimated to be in the $5 to $6 million range.
Fantastic.
And offer additional hangar space and other FBO related services to our community. And I like to remind people that not everyone travels on the scheduled airlines. And we see a lot of people coming in and out of the community through general aviation aircraft, business or corporate aircraft as well. And so these are facilities that will be able to serve that segment of our market.
And that's what a fixed base operator does.
That's exactly what a fixed base operator does.
Right. For those who, not unlike myself, may not know exactly what an FBO is at first sight. So it's pretty quiet time for you, a week before Thanksgiving.
Right.
What have we seen up to this point in this year in terms of passenger trends?
Well, obviously, we're getting geared up for a very busy Thanksgiving travel season.
Sure.
The TSA and the airlines have estimated that they expect passenger levels to be pretty close to what they were pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, we're really excited about that. We're excited to see lots of people coming into the building. We love to see the reunions that occur in the terminal building. And it's really just a festive time of year. And we really go out of our way to make sure people feel at home and welcome in the community. But overall, the trends have been very positive over the course of this year.
Okay.
The country at whole is about 20% down from pre-pandemic levels. And that's almost exactly where we find ourselves right now.
Okay.
We're down about 20%. And there's a graphic that's being shared right now on screen that shows kind of the last 3 years, the 2019, which was our record year. And then, of course, what happened to us in the pandemic, where we fell off the cliff in March and April, and then had roughly a square root shaped recovery. And a number of economists have been talking about the square root shaped recovery. And we went through all kinds of permutations. Was it going to be V-shaped, broken L-shaped, all of those types of things. And I really believed early on that the square root shaped recovery was in fact what would happen. And that's how we began to plan around that square root shaped recovery. And then this year in 21, what's been really rewarding is to see the return of patterns that are very similar to pre-pandemic patterns. But again, just off that 20%. So if you look at that graphic, you can see how the patterns have returned, but we're just missing a component of that travel, which we assign right now to the business traveler, not yet coming back in the numbers that they were pre-pandemic.
So looking at that another way, does that mean that the leisure traveler has come back to something close to pre-pandemic levels?
I think that's exactly the right way to describe it, Lynn. I think what we're seeing is that leisure travel has come back very strong. The airlines figured out, I think about this time last year, that they could get people to fly for the right fares to leisure destinations, and they began adding seats into leisure markets. And in our market, as an example, Portland, which has predominantly been a business market for us, was displaced as the second busiest market by Las Vegas.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So that just kind of matches the trend where there are folks who have, we call them, taking their COVID revenge trip. So they want to, they've saved up, they want to get out, they want to go to a sun and fun destination for a few days and get away. And we've seen a lot of that activity. And I've talked to a lot of people in the community who have said, hey, I'm going to take my family. We're going to go somewhere for 4 or 5 days and get some sun, have fun as a family. And I think that's really what's been driving the trend predominantly throughout this year.
Sure. I wonder what kind of adjustment that requires for the airlines themselves. As you referred to, I was in your airport last week on a trip, and everything went well. But in the months leading up to that trip, my reservation was changed 4 times. Obviously, that's an airline, not an airport
Right.
problem. But my question is, are the airlines, what are the airlines doing to adapt to those changes in passenger trends?
A number of things. One, obviously, is that they're adding back staff
Sure.
to try to match what demand is doing. And I think that one of the cues that we all took at the beginning of the pandemic was that the aviation economists that we were all listening to were indicating that the recovery was going to be quite a ways out.
Sure.
And so a lot of decisions were made around staffing, investment, et cetera, around a prolonged recovery period.
Right.
And I think what occurred is that when we started to see people returning much faster, the airlines had to look to add staff back, counter staff, pilots, flight attendants, bring aircraft back into the fleet that had been put into storage. And all of that took a considerable amount of time to spool all of that back up. And it's still going on, obviously.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
think that's why you see some of the volatility at times in the schedules, as they're trying to figure out how to match those resources around the system. And then we have seen some incredible failures, unfortunately,
Right.
as a result of
On a national level.
on a national weather, of combined weather and equipment and crews being out of place. So I do think that that's an effect that we will continue to experience, because when you think about it, we go back to the Great Recession as an example.
Sure.
That was an attack on balance sheets and liquidity, right? And monetary policy could fix that. The circumstances around the pandemic were much different. That was an attack on the income statement.
Sure.
And as a result, businesses have had to figure out different types of business models and supply chains. And so it is no surprise to me, actually, seeing some of the supply chains, issues, some of the supply chain issues that are impacting across the industry. There were issues, again, even earlier this year with fuel, as an example.
Right.
And that was attributed to a number of different things, refinery capacity, as well as available truck drivers and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the takeaways that people can see the differences between the Great Recession and what happened during the pandemic, that attack on the income statement. And that's what's driving all of these changes to business models and the supply chain.
Sure. And you've had to address some of those changes on your end as well. It may not sound like a big deal to the average person, but earlier this week, you announced that you were reopening some of your parking lots out there. And to people who travel a lot, that's a really big deal, isn't it?
It's a really big deal. And it's probably the most visible thing that we did during the pandemic to control our costs. Because again, just like airlines controlled capacity, we had to figure out how to control our parking capacity to try to reduce our costs. And so we were looking at the forecasts, and we had decided we could actually start to close down some of those lots, not operate our shuttle, which was very expensive to operate, and then at the same time not have expenses for snow and ice control last winter, which saved us a considerable amount of money. And so we kind of shrunk down to what we felt was going to be needed during the recovery. And again, pleasantly, so we could just open everything back up again and go back to what was happening pre-pandemic just last week.
Well, you made someone in my life's day when you reopened the Sea Concourse lots.
It's probably the most popular lot, by the way. And we heard a lot about it from our customers when we closed it down. So there are lots of happy people right now that the Sea lot is reopened. And I hope we can expand the Sea lot in the future, as a matter of fact.
No, that's great. So one of the things that I found interesting in when I think about our airport is that through all this volatility and uncertainty, we've still seen airlines adding direct flight destinations in our market. And I'm curious as to why that is, and also what your observation of that is.
Great question and great observation. And we have a slide to share with the viewers this afternoon on the markets that's come up now. And I think it points out, and what it's really amazing is we now have more destinations as we recover from the pandemic than we had pre-pandemic.
Sure.
And there were a number of airlines that took the pandemic as an opportunity, again, as they were kind of reorganizing their their business plans to look at opportunities differently than they may have pre-pandemic.
Sure.
And so that allowed us, in some cases, to go to them and make the case for additional service, either returning the service or adding new service. And we had a number of new service adds that you can see on the slide. An example being new airlines that came in during the pandemic, like Allegiant.
Right.
And what was really great about that is we have serviced additional seats to Las Vegas, which
Sure.
again, we talked about, but also they decided to fly nonstop to Orange County.
Mhm.
And Orange County was our largest market that had not been served with a nonstop.
Oh, really?
So it was our
Interesting.
15th busiest market. And so
Sure.
we were delighted about that. And no sooner did Allegiant announce service to Orange County than Southwest decided to serve Orange County.
Right.
So again, competition, more seats in the market. So that was really great upside for our community. And obviously a new carrier, AHA Airlines, is starting December 15th. And
Right.
they follow a model that's very close to Allegiant's model, but obviously at a little bit smaller scale.
Sure.
And so we're really excited about that service, but also working with the rest of the carriers about when to restore service, what should that look like, frequency, aircraft gauge, size, all of those things we engaged in those conversations, and by and large have been very successful seeing restorations and net new service
Right.
come to the community. So as difficult as the environment was, there were still opportunities in the environment. And those of you out there who know us and know how we work, we're very aggressive with air service development, maintaining good relationships with the airlines and good communications. And I think that all paid off with what you see in the results now with 22 destinations
Sure.
as we recover.
Now, I noticed that the airport promotes those quite a bit. And the other thing that I've noticed that you may not be aware of is when we write about a new direct flight, it performs well. The story does well. It gets a lot of
Yes.
clicks. And so I was curious to know from your perspective, what is the importance of having a breadth of direct flights?
There's a number of reasons that's important, and it will surprise people who are listening today, because when you print that story and we get a really good result of people clicking into that and reading it, they're thinking about how they can go somewhere now, maybe for business or leisure travel. But really, one of the more important aspects of that new service is that we can bring people here to Spokane.
Sure.
So that we can bring them in for leisure, we can bring them in for business. That's really what's amazing about some of the strategic connections that we've been able to add to our service map. And I would say a couple of those that come to mind are DFW and Atlanta in particular,
Sure.
because of the accessibility to international markets. So
Right.
if we can take a business person who's in Brazil and get them to Spokane in one stop over DFW,
That's a win.
that's a win.
Yeah.
And so those are the types of things that we're thinking about all the time. But it's always interesting because when we talk about that locally, people are like, this is really great because now I can go visit a friend or a family, or I have a business there. But we're also thinking about the inbound into the community as well.
Fantastic. I neglected to mention that we have a question and answer feature with our event today. If you've been here before, you know about it. Please type in any questions you have for Larry, and once we're done with our conversation, we'll get to those. One of the things that you're hitting on when you talk about those flights and bringing people to Spokane is economic development. And I was curious to know what you see as the role of your organization in economic development in our region.
Well, thank you, Lynn. That's a very significant question. We could probably spend a long time talking about this afternoon, but
no doubt.
I will say that I hope that this is getting across out there in the community, is that we're much more than a place to catch a plane, I like to say. We really have a vision to deliver a significant economic impact for the community and be a very significant and ever-growing economic engine and job creation machine.
Mm-hmm.
And the vision that we have around that is to be a world-class transportation, logistics, and advanced manufacturing center with an emphasis on aerospace. So all of that value in the infrastructure that we invest in is focused on having multimodal and intermodal efficiencies so that we can figure out how to move people and goods better than anybody else out there.
Right.
And when we can do that, we can add value organically to the existing business community that's out there, but then we can also attract new business investment. And that's really what we're getting up every single day thinking about. And what's really great about that is that when we're creating jobs and we're adding value into the community, that's all going to drive additional demand for air travel.
Right.
So really, we're just working in that closed loop and pushing on that flywheel constantly with our infrastructure decisions. And we have some slides to share with everyone talking a little bit about that. And one of the more recent ones that we're really proud of is bringing Amazon Air to Spokane International Airport. Of course, we all worked very hard a few years ago to bring the fulfillment center. And obviously now there are 5 projects going on at various stages, either finished or in development across the region. And I think that that job creation aspect of that is very exciting. We anticipated that when the fulfillment center would open, we expected within 2 years of the fulfillment center opening that there would need to be air support for that fulfillment center.
Right.
And so we already had a plan in place. And I think it's safe to say that Amazon was so impressed with how fast that we could move because we anticipated their needs that they now go around telling other airports that they're working with, do it like Spokane did. And obviously having the PDA was really strategic and critical in that process. The Public Development Authority has been an incredible benefit to our vision and being able to execute in that economic development realm. So in this particular case, the building was built for Amazon by the Public Development Authority. And as you can see in the slide, we have 2 aircraft, a 767 wide body freighter and a 737 narrow body freighter on the ground. And you see all the people that are working around that aircraft. Those are all new jobs, Lynn. And that's what really gets us excited. And in the lower part, we're working on the rail to truck transload facility, which is in the western part of our property.
Right.
And again, we want to be that multimodal, intermodal, efficient connection center. And so having a way to efficiently transfer from rail to truck and back and forth is very critical, especially when you're close to air facilities as well.
Right.
So you look at the Connecting Washington package, the improvements to the interchanges that are being completed, the investment that the city is making, the county is making, the PDA, the airport, plus the private sector, all focused in this area is turning into an incredible job creation machine. And I think, again, the transload will be finished later in 2022.
Right.
And we expect to be able to attract additional development, warehousing, storage facilities, hopefully, again, manufacturing facilities, advanced manufacturing, and ideally aerospace related if we can. And those jobs that we're going to create, hopefully people will decide to spend some of their disposable income and travel with that, or bring people in for business. And we saw that recently with Selkirk Pharma, where their CEO commented on the importance of being near the airport because of the amount of air activity that they anticipated between employees and clients coming in. So again, just harnessing all of that potential energy and really putting it to work for our community, creating value, adding jobs.
That's great. And it's fascinating how the West Plains has grown up around you over the last 5 to 15 years.
Yes.
But
and
even just in the last 5 years.
Even in the last 5. And again, I would attribute it to good planning. I would attribute it to aggressive marketing, and also attribute it to the leadership that we've had throughout the airport, our board, the city council, the county commissioners, the mayors, all focusing on things like creating the PDA as an example. And I think many, many years from now, when people look back, they will say that was an incredibly good decision and very strategic decision. And I think that's when we could see things beginning to really start to happen and unlocking all that potential out around the airport.
Yeah. You know, we should try to find a way to have Todd Coleman on this at some point from
Yes.
S3R.
Yes, we've been keeping Todd very busy. And that's the idea.
Yeah, good. Now, you mentioned manufacturing. And one of the things that we saw a little bit of a focus on prior to the pandemic was working on a facility for Boeing or other aerospace manufacturers. And I'm curious to know, when do you think we'll see that pick up? And it doesn't have to be Boeing per se, but when do you think we'll see that kind of effort pick up again?
I think we will begin to see it within probably the next couple of years.
Sure.
There's been a lot of focus right now on Boeing around the MAX that is now we're getting on the other side of, and now
Sure.
777X. We're beginning to get on the other side of 777X, and Boeing will need to figure out what their next clean sheet aircraft design is going to be.
Sure.
And prior to the pandemic, it was thought that it would be what we call a mid-market aircraft or new mid-market aircraft. And a lot of our recruitment activities, both locally and even at the state level, were focused around Washington State being the best place to build the new mid-market aircraft. And that was seen as a replacement for the 757, 767 line of equipment. And I think now it's switching to potentially new small aircraft is the idea, at least right now, that it may be something that is purely more of a narrow body model, but it may be able to fly longer distances. And we're seeing that in some of the other aircraft competitors, like Airbus with the A220 that has, I think, over about a 3,400 nautical mile range, but carries a little over 100 passengers.
Really? Interesting.
So I do think that Boeing is going to need to respond to the marketplace with some type of a new platform. And our objective is to be as big a part of that as we can possibly be, and to make sure that we are seen as an advantage for supply chain partners. Again, having the infrastructure, having cost efficiencies on how we move people and goods, raw materials, all of those types of things contribute to the value proposition for that. So we continue to be very optimistic about the future of aerospace in our community.
That's fantastic. Well, it'd be interesting to see what unfolds as the recovery matures.
Yes.
Much of the economic development that we've talked about involves projects around the airport, but there's actually a number of capital projects either planned or underway at the airport itself at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we also have some graphics to share with everyone who's viewing as well on some of the projects that we've been working on. Some may not have been as visible as others, Lynn, but probably the most visible one, and the one that people are adjusting to right now, is our new airport inbound drive.
Right.
And the idea behind that was to be able to split off all of our parking traffic from all of the other traffic that needed to access the curbside.
It's a smart move.
We think so. And we think as there will be further improvements over time in the terminal area that will make drop off and pick up a lot easier and better for the customers, because we're always focused on having the best customer experience possible. And so we are very pleased with what we've seen so far in the rearrangement, but it also allows us to expand parking lots like we talked about. Maybe the C lot can expand easier now, or other facilities, maybe another hotel or something like that out in that area as well. So it was a way for us to solve some of that traffic related issue and efficiency, but also a way to monetize the property ultimately.
Sure.
So that's what we're excited about. And then we just finished paving 4.5 acres of new concrete for new aircraft parking positions just east of the Southwest Airlines gates. So pre-pandemic, we were running out of places to park airplanes, which of course we would say that's a really high-class problem to have, but it was really starting to cause a lot of issues. And so we knew we needed to add capacity. And we were able to connect with a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration under the CARES Act that provided 100% of the cost to us last year. And
Okay.
so we were actually able to deliver that project without requiring any local match, which was very helpful.
Sure.
And so that project just was completed and just opened a couple weeks ago, and we're parking airplanes on it at night, and it's doing what it was intended to do. And then we've spent a lot of money and time rehabilitating our rental car facilities. People should know and probably expect that rental car revenue does make up a significant amount of our success in terms of not having to rely on any taxpayer money to run the
Sure.
airports. So we operate only on the fees that we earn through the operation of the airport. And so rental car revenue is very important. And we want to make sure the rental car customers are having a really good experience. And so we've been working on a number of projects to reinvest in the rental car area, and we will continue that into 2022 and 23 with some things that'll be much more visible to the customers. And I think they'll be really excited when they see it.
Great. Great. Beyond that, what are some projects that are in the either design or visionary phase for you?
Well, as many people will remember, when we were having our record year in 2019,
right.
Things were a bit uncomfortable at peak hour. The checkpoints were very crowded,
Sure.
and hold rooms were crowded. And we knew that we had to be looking at expansion of the terminal facilities. And we have a slide to share again with the viewers to show that right now we're preparing in 2022 to move forward with what we call our phase 1 renovations, which is a 3-gate expansion of the C terminal.
Okay.
And then a reconstruction of the area that is currently the ground level hold room, or the infamous cattle room,
Sure.
for Alaska. So that will go away when we're done with this. And we will have hold rooms all up at the second level.
Sure.
And that will allow us to serve the passengers more efficiently, and concentrate services, and hopefully have better capacity for services. And again, a better customer experience. So it would remind you in the east side of going, when it's done, going out the C gates at SeaTac, where everybody's up at the same hold room. You take a nice walk down through a covered walkway. And we have some graphics to show what that's going to look like when it's finished. And remembering that it's so important that the airport is seen as the front door image of our community.
Absolutely.
So as people come in and out of our community, their assessment of our community may be significantly formed by what they experience or see at the airport.
Right.
So we want to make sure that if they're bringing their family here, and they might bring a business here, when they come into our community, they see a really well-functioning, well-invested in airport that's offering really world-class facilities and services.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the efforts that we have ongoing right now are focused on delivering on that vision. And we're really excited to see this project through. And of course, there is a big project that now has an even greater chance of moving forward because of the passage of the infrastructure bill.
Sure. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
And we worked very hard to make sure that airports were going to be in the infrastructure bill. And we were talking a lot to our elected officials and committees of jurisdiction around the importance of investing in terminal facilities, because historically, most of the grant projects favored flat work, taxiways and runways and aprons. And as a result, we had really great airfields, but terminal facilities were beginning to struggle in our country. And so the Central Hall improvements are really critical to the future of the terminal area at the airport. And that will allow us to have greater consolidated baggage claim, but even more importantly, a consolidated passenger screening checkpoint.
Sure.
And I think we have some visuals on that potentially. If we don't, we can always make those available. But the whole idea behind consolidating the checkpoint is to, again, open it up, make it more efficient so we can get people through. And as we get people through more efficiently, again, good customer experience. And again, we will be able to qualify for a number of different things, new technology, screening equipment, canines, and other things that, again, all help for that experience to be very efficient. And so we'll go from having two somewhat constrained checkpoints today to a much better situation once we can build the central hall. And so we will be applying for funding in the new infrastructure bill,
Right.
And be focusing that application on the central hall project.
Great.
Yes.
Great. So do you have, with either the C concourse expansion or the central hall, do you have timelines at this point, or?
We will start we believe we'll be able to start the C concourse expansion this summer. And ideally just roll right into the central hall, maybe just subsequent construction packages. So maybe over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a lot of construction in the terminal area. But our job is going to be able to make sure that it's not at all noticed by the passengers. So that's our challenge. And that's what we're working towards, is to make sure that we can do all of this and also continue to maintain a very good customer experience throughout.
Sure. Good deal. Well, listen, I have more questions, but I have a feeling that I'm hogging the time. So do we have any questions from our viewers at this point?
We do, and they came in prior to you explaining something, so this may be repeat. Well, I'm going to ask you anyway in case you want to add to it. But from Greg Francis, can you speak to the multimodal capabilities the SIA has been working on, especially regarding rail? I know you talked a little bit about that, but what else could you add, and maybe the next steps?
Great question. And what we're really trying to accomplish there is to bring rail into the property, which we were able to do initially through the help of our state elected officials to provide us with funding to pull a spur off of the Geiger spur, and able to bring that successfully into the airport property. Now with the build grant, which is now called RAISE, the build grant that we received in 2019, we will now have this ability to take shipping containers, again, from truck to rail, rail to truck. An example of an existing business that will be able to benefit from that potentially would be Zach Designs. They're one of the largest users of shipping containers in Eastern Washington. Now we're going to be very, very close, almost on their doorstep. And so you think about the efficiency opportunities with that, and that's really exciting. But we intend to pull more rail into the airport's property over time. And again, recognizing that long-term, and this will not surprise anybody, we have designed that to make sure that the rail is capable of taking Boeing fuselages. So again, we do all of these things that look like individual projects, but they are functionally related to a much bigger vision.
Excellent. Excellent.
And from Lars Gilbers, hi Lars, do you see climate events like forest fires impacting the demand or operations?
Great question, Lars. We do. And it may surprise viewers, but we do actually have an aerial firefighting company based at Spokane International Airport, Aeroflight. And Aeroflight has a fleet of aircraft that drop either water or retardant, depending on what they are tasked to do, either by DNR or by the U.S. Forest Service in any of these situations. And so they have been very active on the field. And in fact, they have been a very significant employer. When we first recruited them to come to Spokane International Airport, they arrived maybe with about 30 employees. And I think the most recent estimate from their GM was close to 170 employees.
That's fantastic.
And so not only does it fulfill a very important function, safety function in our region and in this part of the US, but also it's a very significant employer and job creator in and of itself. So I do see an increased amount of operations occurring around controlling and battling wildland fires.
And a question from Kevin Tuig. Hey, Kevin, and you've answered part of this at least. What is the status and timing of a new terminal at SIA? And will the new terminal accommodate all airlines?
Great question. I think we did cover a lot of that when we were talking about TREX Phase 1 as well as the Central Hall. And the idea behind part of the TREX project is to create additional gate capacity to accommodate not only the existing airlines that we have, but also potential new entrants. And as we talked about earlier in the broadcast, we're really focused on trying to work with our airline partners, but also to recruit new airline partners into our market that may not have flown here before. So we're working very hard on that. And the other side of it is to make sure that we have the gate capacity once we are able to connect on those opportunities. And so Kevin's question is very critical, is that we're thinking about that as part of what we do. And another part of it is that we will go through and we will convert all gates to what we call common use gates, and using technology that's available to do that. So we will have a lot more flexibility across all the gates to use them in ways that we haven't before been able to use them, because the airlines have their proprietary systems in.
Sure.
And so now when we replace all of those with common use, it's almost like getting a terminal expansion without having to add gates, because you can now utilize those gates more efficiently.
So you could just work Fiji Airways in just very smoothly.
Fiji Airways on the target list as of now.
A question from Christopher Savage. Are there any plans on expanding air routes from SIA to other municipal international airports? I know we have the slide about what has happened or returned. What's next?
Great question. As you know, we're always looking at strategic opportunities and studying our market so that we know where we should be applying ourselves in the approach to different carriers. And it's kind of like playing four-dimensional chess, because it's not about market share anymore. It's really about profit.
Okay.
And so there may be someone who says, hey, we seem to have an awful lot of people that want to go from Spokane to somewhere else.
Right.
The question is, yes, that may be true, but can we carry them at a profit that makes sense for us?
Sure.
And so again, we have to figure out a lot more than just that sort of bulk number.
Just more than demand.
It's more than demand. We have to be able to prove that they can make money in that market. And so that's another factor. And so we're looking at, what is their corporate strategy? What type of aircraft do they operate? How do those aircraft move around the system? Where do they need to be? Are there opportunities that are placement opportunities where we might be able to say, hey, you have an aircraft shell on the West Coast, fly it to Spokane and then turn it around and fly it to JFK, because it needs to be on the East Coast in the morning and then go to Europe.
Sure.
So we're always looking at all of those things, and it's very complicated, as you can imagine. It's become very, very competitive with a lot of communities engaging experts and those types of things, just like we do. So it's a long answer, but really, I think some of the bigger goals for us are obviously East Coast destinations in the Mid-Atlantic. So New York City, Baltimore, Washington, Dulles, all of those types of places are, for us, those are our big audacious goals.
Right.
But obviously there's a lot of other goals as well. We still need more seats in California, greater connectivity and frequency in certain markets, especially some of the longer markets like DFW, Atlanta as well. So we're always working across a whole menu of those types of opportunities.
Right. As are, I'm sure, all of your peer.
Absolutely. It's become
airports.
incredibly competitive, Lynn, out there. And we have to work very hard to make our case to the airlines, because right behind us are 20 other cities trying to make their case to the airlines.
Right. Interesting.
And another question from Lars, a good one. With global climate change increasing as a recognized priority, how do you see that impacting SIA?
Well, I think probably one of the most immediate ways is looking at ways that we can use infrastructure wisely, building in a sustainable way. As our terminal building evolves, it will be LEED certified. We don't know whether that's going to be LEED gold or silver or bronze at this point, but obviously building to those sustainability objectives is very important for us, and having efficient buildings. We're also in the process of installing a significant number of EV stations in our parking garage right now. And so electrification is going to be a big part of it. Sustainable aviation fuels is going to be another big part. And we're just now beginning to look at what are the types of facilities we need to be able to accept, store, filter, and dispense sustainable aviation fuels, and are they different in some of their characteristics? So there's some science that we have to go through behind all of that. But I think, again, it's just really going to be looking at that overall sustainability. electrification, sustainable aviation fuel, very similar to what you see a number of communities doing across the board.
Interesting. So is it, when you look at it from the airline point of view, is it mostly the fuel end that they're focused on, or is there an effort in terms of creating aircraft that are?
It's both.
Okay.
And that's an intuitive question. It's really both. The wing technology, engine technology is going to be very important as they can gain efficiencies. But I think by and large, I really am a strong believer that sustainable aviation fuels are really going to contribute greatly to our environmental goals.
Sure. Great.
And put on your visionary cap, because Chris Kelly has a great question. Does the airport have any long-term plans for an international terminal? And what about a third runway?
Great questions. We are always thinking about international service. And I think the way that we would begin to create opportunities for that would be designing our gates or a gate in a manner that could connect up to an FIS facility where we would have customs come in.
Right.
And I do think that initially it would be mostly charter operators.
Okay.
And a lot of it could be charter operators to, again, sun and fun destinations outside the US, Mexico, Caribbean, places like that.
Sure.
I think those are very achievable. And we are thinking about that in the way that we're designing our gates and thinking about the future facilities.
Right.
That's, to me, I think that's something that is very attainable for us.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we do have a mind towards that in what we're doing with Trex. The third runway, the good news about the third runway is we have all the land that we need right now to build it, and the city and the county have protected it with zoning. And so we are in great shape. I don't see any immediate need for a third runway.
Okay.
But as we grow over time, we will probably get to a point where we need to begin looking at it more seriously. But if you think about the runway capacity right now, like a volume, like a cup, and you can fill up that cup with aircraft operations, we're probably only, probably somewhere below half full on that cup,
Right.
In that volume. And so we've got a ways to go volume wise before that will trigger us needing to do something like the third runway. But again, the good news is the vision that many people in the community had to set aside the land for that and acquire the land and put the zoning in place. There are many communities around the United States, when I talk with my airport CEO colleagues, that are very jealous about that.
They're more landlocked.
Yes, and more landlocked and challenged around that.
Sure.
And, you can see some communities who really have suffered because they haven't provided for enough airport capacity in their communities. And now they are landlocked. And there's a whole host of problems that are created around being landlocked as well. So I feel very good about the future, and just having that option out there is really positive for us.
So would you say a third runway is more like 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Or?
Absolutely. It's definitely more in the longer term than the shorter term. And again, recognizing that aircraft technology does have some things to do with that, and doing other incremental things. Like, for instance, we put in a few years ago high-speed exit taxiways. What those do is it reduces runway occupancy time. So you get a capacity bump out of that, right? So you can do those types of things and really stretch the capacity of your existing airfield. And those are important things to think about as well.
Great.
And this is a great final question. And thank you, Lars. You're on point today. What do you see the biggest opportunity and largest issue facing SIA over the next decade?
Great question. I think there are significant opportunities for us. And I think the key to that is to be able to continue to match those opportunities with infrastructure, and to make the right decisions at the right time and have the financial resources to carry it out. And it's as good as the infrastructure bill is, and it's good. It's for 5 years.
Right.
And as Lars is thinking, and his question points out, is that this is really long range. And so when you start looking at, okay, this is really great, it's a 5-year program, what happens on the other side of that?
Sure.
And what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we have sustained funding in order to do that? And I do think that there will be policy conversations around that, because frankly, I think long range, and that's what Lars is asking, in my perfect world, airports would be completely economically deregulated.
Mhm.
And allowed to do things outside of a lot of the federal limitations that we have on how we do business now.
Sure.
And so to me, I think for our country, for our region, for our community, long range, economic deregulation of airports would probably be on my list of one of the most important challenges out there.
But what do you mean by the economic deregulation?
Well, airports are limited in so many ways in terms of how they can generate their income,
Okay.
and how they can use their resources. And we would like to be able to be free of a number of those types of constraints.
Sure.
And able to charge what we think the market should bear on any given increment of business that we are creating.
Okay.
And so there are things that are on the airline side of things that are very heavily regulated by the federal government. And it makes it difficult. The passenger facility charge is another example,
Right.
where it is a fee that has been artificially constrained now for over 20 years.
Right.
And the equivalent fee in Canada, by the way, is up over $40. But airports in the United States have been artificially constrained against raising fees to provide the infrastructure.
I think we talked about that 5
We
years
have,
ago.
and it costs more to deliver infrastructure because of that. And you have to pay it all in interest costs because you have to bond finance more.
Sure.
So you can't pay go as much as you could if you had a fee that was set to your capital program.
Okay.
And so in Spokane, maybe that fee is $13.50 instead of $4.50. And maybe in Seattle, maybe it's $35.25 or whatever it needs to be based on that airport and that market. And those are the types of things that I would like to not be constrained by. So I think economic deregulation would be a game changer long term.
Sure. Well, Larry, it's been great to see you.
You too, Lynn.
I think I set a record for saying interesting on this one. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. And thanks to everyone who joined today. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to connect with you and to update you on all the great things going on at the airports.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Thank you to Impact Washington for being our sponsor today. And once again, thank you for joining us. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have safe travels as always. And please join us next month when we'll have Grant Forsyth from VistaCorp talking about his forecasts for 2022.